Hello, everyone. My name is Renata, and today I have a very, very special guest, Stephen Cope from very far away, Massachusetts, America. Um, Stephen is a best-selling author and scholar who specializes in the relationship between Eastern traditions and Western psychology. He's also a founder of Kripalu Institute for Extraordinary Living, where yoga's and meditation's effects on ordinary life are examined with researchers from various universities in the United States of America. And I know that your last book, which is called The Dharma in Difficult Times, had just came out, but I would also show this book, which I still have. That was the first book I read of yours, and that really touched my soul. So hi and welcome, Stephen.
Hi, Renata. Thank you. It's lovely to be with you. I have never been to Lithuania, but now I want to come over and see what it's all about. I absolutely love that you are taking us back to my very first book, which is, we just discovered, is 24 years old, almost a quarter of a century. And that book is pretty much what launched my whole career. So thanks for loving it.
I loved it. I still do. And the quest for the true self, it resonates so deeply. I mean, especially nowadays, where we all feel a little bit lost. We don't know what the meaning of life is anymore. We don't feel like we are in a good place at the right time. We don't raise children as we would like them to be, I guess. Like everything feels so awkward all the time. And so the quest for the true self, it's timeless, I guess. The book itself, and then, the sentence, the quest for the true self,
Yeah.
because we all go through it all the time.
It's absolutely right. I mean, what you've just said about the times that we're living in, especially, I think really resonates with me. The Eastern contemplative traditions, both yoga and Buddhism, were very interested in this idea that we can lose our true self, we can veer away from our authenticity, we can live in some way that's off tilt from our true nature. So, the Buddha called this dukkha, which is a Pali word, which really means, it's usually translated to mean suffering, but it really means unsatisfactoriness. Like we sense that we're not living our best lives, our full lives, that we're not touching everything human that we really want to touch. And so I think you're right that the idea of the true self, the authentic self, the fully alive self is very compelling. In the yoga tradition, of course, it's called jiva mukti, which means the soul awake in this lifetime. And I love that idea, the soul awake in this lifetime. So yeah, the whole the title of that book, I think, was well chosen.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. So we live very close to my children's school, and I go there with them in the morning because we have a dog. So at the same time, I can walk the dog. And I had just one of those moments, where everything is wrong. Like, I guess, everything is wrong. My mood was wrong. Breakfast was wrong. Children's behavior was wrong. Like, everything was wrong. And I was like, wait again. Like, where is the meaning of, life? Like, where is it? I felt like I lost it. Like, there's no more meaning around me. And it was like, wait a little bit, Renata. What's missing? That's not the meaning. What's missing? This is you in this moment. Because you are so caught up in your head with this is wrong, this is not good, this should be better, I should have done that. But really, what was missing in the moment? That wasn't the meaning. That was me. I was absent. I don't know where I was, but I wasn't in the moment.
Exactly. and in the moment is the only place we can experience our true self and our true life. And which is why all of the contemplative traditions are about, okay, just calm down, settle down, breathe, bring yourself fully into this moment. And that's where authentic life really is. But of course, we do lose it. It's very helpful. I don't know, do you have a regular meditation practice?
It's not formal, but yes, I do.
I find that it's my meditation practice that becomes my true home in a way. Like every day when I sit down on my cushion and I utter a few big sighs of relief as all that stress begins to roll away, and I just sit with myself and breathe. I use a very simple Buddhist technique called shamatha, which is, dude, just be with the breath as it is, as it arises and passes away. And not all the time, but very often, I settle down, get into this very quiet, somewhat blissful place. And it's so helpful to have that as a touchstone, like every day, even for a few minutes, so that when you hit those moments like you did at school, you have enough perspective to know, oh, I remember my true self. I remember who I really am. And you can come back to it more easily if you have that daily touchstone. So for me, wow, especially as I get older, Renata. So I'm 74. I've been practicing meditation since I was 24. And I encourage all my young friends, I beg them, please learn to meditate, learn to practice, because otherwise you'll float along on the sea of life like a leaf in the wind, and you won't have any true home on this planet. And most of them don't learn to meditate ever, no matter how often I tell them to. Maybe they will when they're older, but the fact is that it's not easy learning to meditate. And I think we maybe think it should be easier. And I'm not saying it's complicated, but it takes some real effort over time. And what I've discovered is that it bears such fruit over time, such big fruit in terms of my well-being, that I just want everybody to practice.
You know what I was thinking? When you said, I have this, breath technique or breath practice. Well, I just follow my breath and then I just sit. How on earth, and non-offense meant, how on earth that could be interesting? Those times where we are under so much constant animation and entertainment coming from, all around us, like, this screen, which promises so many things. And then what you promise is just sit and follow your breath. Like, what? It's so dull. I mean, what's wrong with you?
Exactly, right? It can't be that simple. It can't possibly be that simple. And so our minds talk us out of it all the time and decide that this or that or whatever else is really important. I love Henry David Thoreau. Are you familiar with Thoreau? So he's one of our America's greatest amateur philosophers. And he wrote a book called Walden, which was about his decision in his late 20s. He was very aware of what we're just talking about, of how distracted most of us are in our lives, distracted. And so he went away to this little cabin, which he built on a pond for 2.5 years, intentionally to let go of the distractions and to settle down and to see what he found, right? So he said, simplify. This is a quote from Thoreau. most everything is a distraction. So in those 2.5 years, Thoreau wrote all of the most of the brilliant stuff that he ever wrote was written in those 2.5 years when he was doing nothing, right? So that doing nothing, sitting quietly by the pond, and as he sat there, he said, "I'm a yogi." He was reading the Bhagavad Gita, and this was back in 1830. And he learned about what yoga was, and he said, "I'm a yogi." So he went on this 2.5 year retreat. He settled down, and when he came out of the retreat, he said, this is a classic quote in American philosophy: "Most men lead lives of quiet desperation."
Mm.
Quiet desperation. That's what the Buddha discovered too. It's dukkha. Dukkha is usually translated to mean awry, like just a little bit off. Sometimes it's translated to mean unsatisfactory, like my life doesn't feel satisfactory. But he also discovered that experience of satisfactoriness is built in. It's who we are. You have to settle down into it. Yeah.
I thought about meal without salt, it's like eating something, you still eat, so you're not hungry anymore. You can't complain like we're not hungry. But then there is a lack of taste, like there is a lack of taste. It just, just dull. It's just dull, and you feel like I would like it to have some colors or something. You feel like there must be more. You miss this aliveness, I guess. I usually take my dog's lead. I especially in moments when I feel like there's something missing in my life. I've seen it all. I've heard it all. Like there's nothing more to discover. Like
Yeah.
in those moments, I'm like, okay, let's do like my dog does. And then she's like, when she sees something, she sees it with all her being. Like she's alert. I can feel it. She's all alive inside. And then she sees it. I'm like, okay, let's do that, Renata. Let's try to see things as if it's the first time you are seeing them. And I feel something inside me shift. It's like, really, I see some of them for the first time in my life. I could have lived in that house for 20 years.
Yeah.
Some corners, some colors, some shapes, I have never seen them before. This is like that. Sometimes it was the first time I was seeing them. So, yeah.
Let's talk about dogs, because I have a puppy who's 2 years old now, and I've discovered exactly the same thing. So you probably know that the Dalai Lama has dogs and believes strongly in dogs. He calls them dog Rinpoche, which means dog teacher. So my little puppy has taught me so much about paying attention. So now I have a practice every week on Tuesday afternoon and Friday afternoon. In just a few hours, I will spend the whole afternoon with her, and all we do is wander. And my practice is to be with her just like she's being, and pay attention and wander and sniff and look and savor it, right? Like totally enjoy it. And I swear to God, I can't believe you brought up dogs, because I am so in love. I wish I had a picture of her. I am so in love with this puppy who brings a level of joy into my life that I don't know if I've ever experienced quite. Joy, right? I don't have kids. You have kids, so I know you know joy. The joy of an utterly contingent being. You know what that means, right? A contingent being who's totally dependent on me. And we're riding along in the car, maybe going for a ride, and her little face looking up at me adoringly with this certain vulnerability and just pure love. I mean, dog teacher, as the Dalai Lama says, dog teacher. It's fabulous. I'm so glad. What breed is your pup?
She has no breed, I guess. We found her just
Okay.
abandoned. So yeah, she's like, just a dog.
Does she, do you sleep with her? Does she sleep with you?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, she sleeps with children mostly.
Yeah.
But then sometimes she comes to my bed too. Yeah.
Oh, that's the sweetest thing. I love sleeping with my puppy. She puts her head right on the pillow next to mine, right?
Yeah.
So when I wake up in the night, she's right there. It's so cute. But yeah, I mean, the experience of being present, of aliveness, right, is what we want to aim for. And the paradox of what you said about the salt is that the more we settle down and quiet down and connect with the internal energy, the more alive we feel.
Mm.
I don't know if you notice this, but when you come out of
Yeah.
meditation, colors are brighter, sounds are clearer, everything's a little more alive, like it's all pulsing a little bit. I began meditating when I was 25 with Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Do you know him, the great Tibetan crazy wisdom guru? He's well known in this country because he escaped from Tibet when he was a very young monk. And he went to Oxford in England and studied, and is a great scholar of Buddhism. And he wrote all these marvelous books. So I studied with him when I was a 25-year-old. And I distinctly remember after those meditation sessions how alive everything felt. And that's when I got hooked by the Dharma, right? The teachings of the contemplative world. Because we all want to be alive, feel aliveness. You know, I was trained in psychoanalysis, in psychoanalytic psychotherapy, I should say. And one of the primary things, you know about psychoanalysis, right? The patient's lying down and free associating. And one of the most important things to notice when you're with a patient and they're free associating is the energy, the aliveness in the words, right? When you hit a streak of words that is really important and meaningful and it's alive and you can feel it, it's like a vein of gold. And with the patient, you want to follow that vein, like what's alive in there? What is it that's fascinating you? And you move toward your aliveness.
That's fascinating what you have just said, because I once talked with a psychiatrist who runs the whole hospital. So he's like the chief psychiatrist of the whole hospital, where we only bring people who are like seriously mentally ill.
Hmm.
And he told me that, when they bring me someone who has a disease, mental disease, I never in a rush to treat the disease, because sometimes there is the only way that that person's soul has found to be alive.
Absolutely, that's right. The symptom has meaning and purpose, right? And you have to appreciate that. Oh, there's a great film about that with I'm blocking on the name of it right now. But no, you have to appreciate that this is the way the patient has been able to survive and live any kind of life at all. Absolutely. That's brilliant, psychiatrist. That's not most psychiatrists' point of view.
I know.
Yeah.
Why? Because you were young, you were 24, 25. How come you had this question yourself for aliveness? Usually when we are that young, like
Yeah.
everything seems fine in life.
Yeah. You know, um, I don't remember exactly. Well, I'll tell you the story. So I lived in Cambridge. I was in graduate school at Boston College, which is a very fine university. And there was a house in my neighborhood which had a big all glass doors in the back. And every afternoon I'd walk home from college and I'd see there were 30 or 40 people sitting there, just sitting. They were meditating, but I didn't understand what was going on, right? So one day I went in and I asked the guy, what are you people doing? Everybody's just sitting there. And in that practice, they had their eyelids partly open. And he said, oh, we're meditating. Here, try it. And then he gave me a little instruction. And I sat down with the group and I started coming every afternoon because it was so fascinating. And also because I experienced almost right away a profound sense of well-being. Now, not everybody gets that, but very often early in practice, when you settle down into yourself, there can be a new experience of well-being, profound well-being, like, wow, I'm okay, everything's okay. I'm just breathing and sitting here. And honestly, that was so interesting to me. And I was stressed out with grad school and a relationship. And so I just kept going back every day. And of course, when you practice with a group like that, 30 or 40 people in a quiet room, there's a kind of group energy that's created. And so I'm a cyclist, and there's something called drafting, where you're cycling right behind another cycle and you draft on their energy. So in a big group, you draft on the energy of the whole group. And I dove into the Dharma. It started with practice, and then I started reading Buddhism. And at that point, I was actually in graduate school at a seminary at that point. And I discovered in Buddhism not a religion, but a practice and a point of view about life that was so much richer than the Christian point of view that I'd been studying. You know, in the seminary, it was all up in the head. It was about theology. It was about ideas, right? And there was very little practice. They didn't teach you to pray or to meditate. So when I encountered this practice-oriented way of life, I was hooked, and I just read really deeply. It's almost, Renata, it's almost like an argument for past lives, because there was some recognition, I had some recognition that this is important, powerful, brilliant. I'm going to get this, right? So I was hooked, and that was when I was 25, and the rest of my life has literally been spent investigating Buddhism and yoga.
How do you manage that? I guess the question is, how do you manage that in your ordinary life? I mean, you have those recognitions, you have those sensations when you know that there's something more than that I can see. Like the essential stuff is always invisible to the eye. You have to have another way of seeing that. So you feel that, you know that this is there, you have those recognitions. But when we live in a world where we're still minority who sees that. So your neighbor must be, very different from yourself, your family, your brother, sister, cousins, like, people you live with normally. How do you manage to stay true to that when you are interacting with people who, let's say, don't see that the same way as you do?
Yeah. For me, anybody who knows me will tell you that I have a very predictable, reliable schedule. So I've become very disciplined, right? I have on Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday, my meditation group that I meditate with for an hour and a half. On Monday and Wednesday and Thursday, I work out with a trainer. On Tuesday morning, Thursday afternoon, and Saturday morning, I do yoga with a group. So the only way I manage to stay, and I don't always manage it, but the only way I manage to stay with my feet on the ground, as it were, as you're saying, is by having these almost daily touch-ins with my practice to remember, because we forget almost immediately, we forget. So for me, I see practice as a kind of craft, right? You do it every day. It's not necessarily firecrackers every day. Sometimes the bliss comes, sometimes it doesn't. But I call it suit up and show up. You suit up and you show up in your practice. And it's the one thing my friends will tell you. Don't even ask Steve to do anything on Monday from 5:30 to 7 because he's meditating. It's like number one thing that I do. And I know that out of that practice comes all of this amazing fruit, Renata. It bears fruit. And the Buddha said, this practice bears fruit from the very beginning, even if you're not aware of it, even if you're struggling as an early practitioner, it begins to bear fruit from the very beginning. And now, if you're old like me, and you've been practicing for 50 years, you enter into a period that Jack Kornfield calls fruition. And I love that because there's fruit everywhere, right? Goodwill, happiness. I mean, not all the time. It's not, I don't live in a pink cloud at all. But I do really feel the fruition of a lifetime of practice. And so I try to spread that to my younger friends like you. Well, you're already there. So, and also to answer your question, I surround myself as much as I can with other practitioners who will help remind me. And they're few and far between. I am part of a meditation organization here in Albany. And every other Wednesday night, we do something called Learn to Meditate. We teach a whole bunch of new people to meditate. And they come and they're excited and they're enthusiastic, and we train them and they sit down. At least half of them never come back. Only maybe 10% or less ever actually come back regularly and manage to make the commitment to a serious practice. So, it requires effort. You have to make the time. It's a real commitment. And from my point of view now, it's so magical. It's so wonderful to have made that commitment.
Why do you think the meditation itself it's so easy to explain in words? What does that mean to meditate? I mean, I guess we all get it intellectually very easily.
Yeah.
But when we get down and sit and try to apply a technique, then we feel that it's hard. Because why do you think it's so hard to meditate? Why it's so it doesn't come naturally?
Not at all. It's a paradox. It is natural, but it doesn't come naturally.
Yeah.
And the reason is that it goes against everything in our primitive brain. Remember that our brains developed on the savannas of Africa, where we were both predator and prey. So our brains are wired to constantly be looking for two things: threat and opportunity. Where's the threat? Where's the opportunity? All of us have been through the finishing schools of life, college and so forth. Not all of us, but many of us. But we still are driven profoundly by those two things. Where's the threat and where's the opportunity? The brain, as you probably know from reading the latest literature, has a negativity bias. Right. So when you see something that's threatening, it's marked with cortisol and it's a bias in the brain. So in answer to your question, this practice challenges this limbic system challenges the primitive part of the brain in every way. And yet, as we practice, we begin to create these connections between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, so that there's more communication there, there's more perspective, right? There's more, there's less catastrophizing and less threat that we're experiencing. And so that's why it's not easy. It goes against biology in a certain way.
I have a parent support group where we meet and we do different things. We do talking, but we also do yoga practices. And at the end, we have this brief 10-minute meditation to end the practice. And so often people say, I don't even know if what I do is meditating, because I'm just, I'm just trying to follow my breath, but then I almost instantly caught up in all the thinking. And then okay, follow your breath, follow it. Okay, I'm following my breath, and then again, and then I don't even know if I'm meditating. So I know that's for beginners, but still, how could you be sure that, as you said earlier, that whatever we're doing, it will bring fruits? Should we trust the process from the very beginning?
Absolutely. So look, I'm a very experienced meditator, and I still have times when I get very easily distracted and it's difficult to settle down. But even in those times, it's such a simple instruction that most of us miss it or forget it. It's just come back to the breath over and over again. As soon as you go off on that long trip in your mind, as soon as you notice, you're back. So most of the effort, not just for beginners, but for all of us, involves coming back again and again. And the key thing is not to make that wrong. That's just how it works. And if you get reactive to that and start feeling aversive to it, it just creates suffering. So that's why I like to talk about it as a craftsman. Like it's very simple. You lay brick after brick after brick. You come back again and again. You don't react to it. It's fine if you go off on a 2-minute jag, just come back. After a while, the mind will settle down, maybe only for a couple of minutes. But those couple of minutes are very powerful because they begin to change the brain. They actually begin to change the structure and the function of the brain. So whereas early meditators can drop into these mind states that are very pleasant occasionally, over time, as you're a more advanced meditator, that state becomes a trait of the mind. It actually begins to get hardwired into the brain. So we're much less likely over time to get hijacked by negative emotions or difficult emotions. But again, the effort is always the same, advanced or beginner. Come back again and again to the breath. That's your center. And it eventually, guaranteed, it will work. Now, I've been in the mental health field, so I know for people who are highly identified with the kind of crazy flow of mind and thoughts, very often you have to make adaptations to the technique. So I very often teach those patients walking meditation because it's a little bit easier for the restless mind and body. But even with walking meditation, you walk back and forth and back. Eventually, even those patients with real challenges will have little moments of settling. And those moments themselves will be so intriguing and so happy that they'll want to come back to it. So it's kind of self-reinforcing in that way.
So what you are saying is we must drop any expectations to
Absolutely.
have out of it. Like, I remember that was months, I guess, after I started meditating, like years ago. The first time I felt this fruit of meditation was in a hot moment with my kids where they were still very young, and that was really hard for me. I guess we were fighting against each other and I felt I was going crazy in my head and in my heart, and it was so hard. And then I felt something, and I felt is as if there was this additional space inside me, around me, between action and reaction. Like I felt like I was pulled, and all, that I was compelled, I was pulled to do the same thing I was always doing, so trying to intervene and then fix the situation. And then somehow in that moment I felt, wait a minute, I have a choice. There is nothing to be fixed. There's another way. I just felt it. And in that moment, I knew that's my fruit.
You know, that's totally it. It's as soon as you create just a little space around the moment, what that brings is perspective. In most moments, often we're completely identified with our thoughts. But with that little bit of space, it breaks the identification. So, oh, I'm not that thought, right? I have a choice on how to act. So just coming into that little space around it, that's such a beautiful moment, Renata. I love the way you described that. That's exactly how it happens, right?
And I remember thinking at that time, like, when I felt the space, the first thought that came to my mind was, but if they are able to fight, that means they are alive. And I know it sounds so cliche, like, they are alive, we are all alive. I mean, but when we have those terrible moments in our lives and someone's dead, and we all feel like, okay, what really is important in life, it's that we are alive until we are dead, and then it's really over. But when we forget that every day, and we all get intrigued and angry and frustrated about so many things that really doesn't matter. And in
Yeah.
that moment, I had this insight, like, look, but if they are fighting, that means they are alive. And I felt so much love for them and for myself. And I know how it sounds. I mean,
No, it sounds absolutely real. Yeah. What you did there was you widened your perspective, right? That when we're caught up in our thoughts, we're in tunnel vision. And the practice of meditation gradually allows us to widen the periscope, to widen it. And that perspective brings all kinds of good stuff, right? We stop catastrophizing, we start seeing the good in the moment, and we start seeing things from a stepped back position. Yeah, I love that. Do you know there's all this science now that meditation increases our peripheral vision? So this is a very concrete way of saying it widens our lens, bigger, wider lens. It actually physically does. It increases your peripheral vision. I love that. So the little moment you described is gold, because it was a moment of discovering the fruit of meditation. Wow, there it is, right? And now you'll be able to repeat that again the next time or the time after that. Yeah.
Yeah, don't have any expectation, because that doesn't happen every time.
Yeah, that's right. Well, don't have any grasping, because we all know, most of us know, that the root of suffering in both the Buddhist and the yoga tradition is grasping, aversion, and delusion. Grasping, clinging, holding on to an idea of how things should be, that is the root of suffering, right? Aversion to it, that's said to be even a deeper suffering, hatred of the way it is. So your word expectations is very good. Like, could you meet the moment the way it actually is? What would that be like? The way your dog meets the moment the way it is? What's your dog's name?
Meilute, that means lovely.
Lovely. Oh, that's so sweet.
Mm.
Lovely. Like, how does lovely meet the moment? Not with, well, no, that's not true. Animals do have some form of expectation, which is instinct, but and this is where we human beings have a step up on animals, even dogs, is that we can notice our expectations and let them go, and then meet the moment. I love the Buddha's teaching about the second arrow. So there is pain in human life. Like, we all suffer pain and difficulty. But he said, when you add reaction, like aversion to that, that's called the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain of life, which we all experience. The second arrow is not necessary. That's the one that you add by your own aversion or your own reactivity to the experience of life. So, Sylvia Boorstein, great American Buddhist teacher, says, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Pain of life, you have to meet it with an open heart. And that's really hard, to keep a heart open. I mean, in the middle of Ukraine and all the craziness, how do you keep an open heart? Meditation does really help that. One of the things that I love in my long practice of meditation is so the first stage of meditation, of course, is gathering and focusing the mind, concentrating the mind, creating that one-pointed quality. And that practice alone brings a lot of well-being. The second practice is insight, which is watching the way the whole drama plays out and intervening in it. But the third one that arises is when the mind becomes gathered and quiet and calm, these naturally arising states begin to occur of loving kindness, sympathetic joy, compassion, what we call the Brahma Viharas. The Brahma Vihara means the abode of the gods. They're these beautiful, expansive states that are quite natural. The Buddha said they're our true nature, right? He said greed, hatred, and delusion are just visitors to the mind. The real nature of the mind is metta, is loving kindness, is compassion, sympathetic joy. And when the mind does get quiet, those arise quite naturally. Talk about fruit. It's a beautiful fruit to experience. I have this experience with my puppy, right? So where does all this come from? I look at my dog, and what arises? A profound sense of loving kindness. Loving kindness in these traditions, it really means goodwill. It really means from the heart begins to wish you well. Like, Renata, may you be well. May you be happy. This arises naturally. So with my puppy, that happens all the time. It just gushes up. Oh, my puppy's name is Kenzie. Kenzie, may you be well. Like, I want you to be happy. May you be happy and well and healthy. That's the essence of our nature, and it rises up quite spontaneously, and it's a beautiful thing. Or compassion, another one. If Kenzie were ever hurt, my heart would overflow with compassion, compassion is said to be when the open heart comes close to suffering. It wants the suffering to end. Kenzie, may you be well. May you not suffer. So all of this arises in our meditation practices over time. And, it's not I don't want to sound Pollyanna or overly sentimental or sweet. It's not sentimental at all. It's just our true nature.
You know, those states you mentioned, they all are present in very young children.
That's right. Yeah.
They are all very, they are all loving presences around us. They don't have any of expectations when they very basic needs met. They are hungry when they are hungry. They want to sleep, they want to sleep. But in all their daily interactions, they have this curious, open heart, working and learning different things about life. And then at some point, they do lose it. I mean, we help them, adults, I know, but
Yeah.
and then it's such a pity when later when we have to rediscover it. And it would be that's why I started what I do. I mean, all those talks. I want us parents realize that we could be present in our children's lives in a very different way, and we could pay attention, not so to help them to grow, but not to be an obstacle on their way to their life. Just pay attention and not stand on their way, not stand between them and their life.
All we need to do, and I'm not a parent except to my dog, but that's a lot, right? All we need to do is create the safe container, the loving container, the responsive container. And then the magic of human life is that they grow, they develop, they take in the nurturing that we give them, and magic happens. We don't have to make them grow or develop. All we have to do is hold them, metaphorically speaking and physically speaking. That is, we have to be the container. And then we have to be that same container for the whole world. Oh, there's a sweet little girl behind you. Hi, honey. Oh, she's adorable. Have you read my book, Soul Friends?
No, this is the only one I read.
Okay. You might want to read Soul Friends, especially as a mom, because it's all about the magic of what happens when you create safe space for that little being to develop, right? It's like, again, I go back to dogs because that's my point of reference. Now, almost all of dog training is positive reinforcement. It's not negative reinforcement anymore the way it used to be. It's creating the safe container. And I know with my puppy, she's very easy to train. She's so smart. She gets it right away. If I say no, I don't have to scold her or hit her or anything like that. If I say no, she gets it from the tone of my voice. So I'm having this amazing experience at 74 of being a dad, essentially, with this dog, and how magic it is that all I have to do is love her. Yeah.
It's interesting the way the life unfolds, and sometimes you can be a mom and a dad in a different form, so you don't recognize it at the first time. Maybe that doesn't come as it comes usually.
That's right.
We don't recognize the packaging. But then life unfolds, and in the moment you can, so I am a father, I am a dad.
Exactly. I mean, it's like I say, we used to have a brilliant non-dual yogi teacher named Rishi Prabhakar, who was Canadian, and he used to come to Kripalu and hold retreats for us. And on one retreat, there were 250 of us, and he made us each one in tandem stand up and say, I am the mother of the world, right? I am the mother of the world, which means I'm responsible for the whole world. That is, how I treat my little corner of the world is quintessentially important. It's existentially important how I treat my puppy and my kids or my family around me. That's, all I can do is in my little corner of the world, but it affects the entire world in a mystic way. The way we behave, the way we are in the world. I am the mother of the world. It's up to me just to create a container in my little world with my little family and my puppy that has a mystic impact on the whole field, right? I mean, the Buddha was big in talking about, and yogis, in talking about the effect we have on the field of life by the way we are. This gets us into the whole notions of karma and so forth, but it's a simple principle and it's true.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Our time together. Can you tell where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm easy to find. Stephen Cope, that's STEPHENCOPE. Online, just Google me. I have a website, stephencope.com. I teach mostly, I'm a senior teacher at Kripalu, which is the largest yoga center in America. You can go to kripalu.org, KRIPALU.org. All of my books are on Amazon, and I'm easy to find online.
I'm gonna put that in the notes, so it would be even easier to.
Right. Thank you, Renata.
Very Thank lovely. You, Stephen, and have a lovely. Today is your meditation day, or is your work
Today's
day?
my puppy day. Today's my
puppy day. So today's your, like, you are a scholar today. You are a student.
I am. I'm a student. My dog.
And you're going with your master for a walk. That's
my best day of the week. I love it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
You too, Renata.